good evening, everyone. Today is January 26th, 2023, which is bizarre. But I hope you all had a, hopefully at some point, relaxing New Year. And as we mentioned during our chat time, hopefully we can make a positive difference and really make sure that we're addressing issues like gun violence, which is, of course, a women's issue. Let me share this. Maybe. Can y'all see that?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. I really wanted to make sure, as we go into 2023, and, yes, obviously I will be giving the new board names, but we all wanted to really say, like, okay, what is our statement of purpose? What really is WoW Dems? Let's make sure that we're putting that out, in the forefront, and really, diving into the fact that, especially with all of the hate and bigotry now, what we mean when we say women organizing women Democrats. So here we go. So our statement of purpose is: we are a North Texas-based Democratic club and PAC focused on supporting and electing progressive women candidates through volunteer work and fundraising. Our primary purpose is to increase participation of all women in politics and government. These objectives can be attained by expanding women's political engagement, raising awareness about women's issues, and recruiting, supporting, and electing women for partisan and nonpartisan office. And what this really means to us is, especially in these years where we have nonpartisan offices that are up for positioning, we'll go into this a little bit later, but when it comes to these campaigns, they may not necessarily come to us and say, hey, I want an endorsement, because they are meant to be nonpartisan positions, and that's fine. We're not actually endorsing them with money during the municipals, because obviously there are so many municipals, and we really want to kind of get a feel for how many even reach out to us regarding endorsement in nonpartisan races, because we're not Republicans. We don't openly, campaign with Greg Abbott and say, like, hey, I'm making sure that my, very extreme views get put on these boards. And I don't know how many of you have gone to some of the recent school board and city council meetings, but they are terrifying. It is very scary, and I am not a trans student in these districts. So I can only imagine how much worse it is for them, who are literally being demanded to be put on a registry. Like, that is actually what some of these school boards are demanding, is that they know who these trans students are. And for about 1,000 reasons, that's unacceptable. So it's so important that, regardless of whether or not reasonable candidates reach out to us for like official endorsement, that we at least bring you information on who are the reasonable parties and who are the extreme ones. And that way we can really make sure that these boards and these the school boards and the councils, etc., especially like the ones for these counties in full, are really representative of the actual county, of the actual city, of all of the students. So that is going to be a big focus this year. To that end, I want to make sure we officially put out our statement of inclusion, which is aligned with the Texas Democratic Platform, and this is word for word. Democrats are the party of inclusion. We know that diversity is not our problem, it is our promise. As Democrats, we respect differences of perspective and belief and pledge to work together to move this country forward, even when we disagree. We do not merely seek common ground, we strive to reach higher ground. And I want to clarify, because I've had this fun conversation with some family members and some former friends, and of course some Republican precinct chairs, where when we say even when we disagree, we mean on actual policy, on actual solutions, not on our trans students actually, people, or do Black people have the right to vote? Or, do women have the ability to think for themselves and make medical decisions? Like, these are not differences of opinion. Like, these are not things that we can disagree on and move forward. Like, these are literal values that we hold, and that is whether or not we share the same humanity, not whether or not we quote unquote disagree. So I want to make it very clear, of course, and I know every single one of you agrees, that discrimination based on culture, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual identity, language, disability, etc., will not be tolerated. We do not consider those political. Those are not a culture war. This is literally people's lives. And unfortunately, these things do need to be actually said and officially documented, because that's where we are right now. We literally do have people of color and women of all ethnicities being attacked and dying, even though it is completely preventable. I do also want to mention, though, because we have several leaders that are immunocompromised, this also means that as inclusion and as being accommodating, we would ask for all of us to be leaders in this and actually wear masks in indoor spaces per the science. So if you haven't been doing that, please, please think of those of us who are in fact immunocompromised. And if you are in an indoor space, please, just the common courtesy of wearing a mask, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Thank you. All right, now we get into the meat and potatoes of the January meeting. Every 2 years, we actually elect a board. And I wanted to make sure that, again, this was like very open, very transparent. Here is what the officer positions are. Here is what they do. And then I'll go into what some of our committees are, because I do want to make sure people know what on earth like these are. When we say what is, the candidate committee or the legislative committee, what does that mean? Like, what am I actually getting involved in, and where do I kind of align? So the president is responsible for holding regular board meetings and works with the board to set strategies and develop plans to meet organizational objectives, which we just went over. They preside over each general meeting. They ensure overall smooth operation of the organization and committees. They also write, of course, the president portion of the bi-monthly newsletters. The vice president works with the events and outreach team and is responsible for the events. So they're kind of our facilitation liaison for the bi-monthly general membership meetings. Although, of course, right now the facility has been virtual for accessibility and safety. They will identify, schedule, and coordinate quality speakers for the meetings. And I do want to point out, this is, they'll coordinate it, but if y'all have examples of, ooh, I'd love to hear this particular person, or, ooh, have you, do you know about this particular speaker? They, do an amazing job on making sure, this particular community's voices are amplified. Please let us know. We want to hear those things. Also, oh, yes. Also, if the president is absent, then the vice president will handle those responsibilities in her absence, their absence. The secretary takes the minutes at the meetings. That actually should be bi-monthly, so that's my fault. I apologize. I will fix that. And the board meetings, which are also bi-monthly. They will take the minutes and document proceedings from all of these meetings. And we actually have a shared drive where those will be stored. So that way, again, we're all making sure that we're being transparent, we're documenting, we're all on the same page. And most importantly, when these things have new people in the positions, they actually know what's going on, what happened in the past, who's been reached out to, what was, the process. It actually has helped, because before I was the president, I was on the candidates committee, and it was a huge help to know, here was the template for endorsement letters. Here was the template for the endorsement process. It's really been why we have been sort of the point of contact for a lot of these clubs that have wanted to get into the endorsement process, where it's like, hey, what does your questionnaire look like? And I highly, it was Rebecca Arredondo, and recently, of course, it's been Laura Dapkus. Highly, highly credit them with really honing in on this is the information we need to know, and let's not go so far in the weeds that these candidates, need 2 weeks to fill out this questionnaire, but we also have a feeling of whether or not this person has been vetted for, potential endorsement. And then, of course, last but definitely not least, the treasurer. They actually make sure that we stay afloat. They provide detailed record keeping on all income and expenses. They prepare the monthly reports for the board and membership. They interface with the individual preparing our monthly reports to the Texas Ethics Commission. And this is like serious business. Like some of these, especially because of number one, the fact that we're Democrats and the fact that we are women, we really need to be like buttoned up and make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, because we don't want any excuse to come after us for fines and etc. Because we want to make sure that we are absolutely holding ourselves to a high standard. So Linda Graham has been our treasurer, and she's done an amazing job. So we are very grateful for our treasurer. All right, so committees. We have basically 5 committees. One, of course, is the membership committee. They keep a record of the members. So again, if you have not already, we have annual calendar dues from January to December. So if you haven't already, wowdems.org/join, $30 annually or $15 if you're a student. So they make sure that they document in our database who is a member. They also make sure, of course, that they put that contact information in things like, for now, at least we have constant contact, and that way we can make sure that you all are informed. And this is especially important because members are allowed to vote, right? They'll also, when we were meeting in person, they would also follow up with guests as required. So they would actually be the ones that were signing everyone in. And they also really come up with initiatives to welcome new members. And also, some of y'all probably received that questionnaire where it was like, what would you like to see? Like, what are some things that, membership really means as far as like being a part of the organization? And then, of course, there's our fundraising committee. They need to plan and implement a major fundraiser. And that, of course, as all of us know, that's a major job. So it is really nice to be able to have them say like, okay, I have a plan, here we go. And of course, as most of you know, or maybe not, so our last in-person fundraiser was the end of February in 2020. Like it was literally right before everything got shut down. So super bizarre time, but yes. So obviously we want to make sure that we keep in mind, hey, 3 years into the pandemic, what really makes sense as families are struggling, and how can we make sure that we take all of these, donations and combine them and actually help these women get into office. So it really does make a difference when, even if everyone gives, $5 a month, that we put that together and can really make the difference when it comes to these campaigns. It makes all the difference in the world for some of these. For municipals, of course, races are won and lost by dozens of votes. But honestly, even for state Congress, some of these races are won and lost by a couple hundred. So your vote counts. Please vote. And then, of course, there's the communications committee. They maintain the distribution list for those email communications I mentioned. They also will send press releases regarding events. Sometimes they write articles, or they might ask for articles. Some of you probably remember a couple years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, where it was, how does this affect you? And that way we could actually put a human face on this, very overwhelming giant event that's happening. They also, it says, maintain website and Facebook page. We're actually, as a board, we've been chatting about potentially taking this off the shoulder of a volunteer leader, because everyone on this board and all of these committee chairs, they are volunteers, and that's a lot of work. So we've potentially been talking about having basically hiring a website coordinator, like actually hiring, so that way it's, a paid position, because otherwise that's a lot. Like hiring a company, obviously not like a person for that position, but it will really make a big difference on all of our lives, since a lot of us might be parents, we might work full time, and be really doing this to make sure that we're improving lives in our community. So being able to take some of that weight off will actually allow us to have a greater reach and really be able to focus on our objectives. And then, of course, I mentioned the candidate committee. They identify and document opportunities for local and statewide election or boards. Sometimes they actually will reach out for potential candidates in our membership and say, like, hey, you're really qualified. There's this particular position that, nobody is reaching for. We need to make sure that we have Democrats, especially women, in some of these positions as leaders. What do you think? Here's how to file. Here's what to know. Here's where to get training. They also will make sure, of course, that they really review and vet those endorsement questionnaires so that they can in turn be voted on by the board. So basically the candidate committee will review all of those, and they'll say, like, okay, here's who we are recommending, yes, endorse this person, no, don't endorse that person. And if they are a woman candidate, we will say, hey, do we want to endorse this person with money? If so, how much? So they'll bring those recommendations to the board, and we will vote on it, like yes or no, or maybe with a slight change. That's how that works. And then events and outreach. So they'll, again, work with the vice president to schedule quality speakers for the meetings, bi-monthly meetings. They'll handle logistics. And of course, nowadays that means Zoom, but it was originally the rental, hospitality, et cetera, those pieces. But they'll also, and this is something that was implemented since the beginning of the pandemic, planning and implementing other social events. So really doing some of that outreach where it's, hey, there's this coalition building event. Let's make sure we're a part of that. We're really represented there, because we want to make sure that those voices are amplified. All right. So 2023 officer candidates. For president, we actually are co-presidenting. We're doing co-presidents. Sorry for the slip up in grammar there. It'll be Sadia Ahmed and Trish Patterson. We are very excited. Both of these women are massive activists in the community and have been for several years. And Sadia, unfortunately, had a family emergency, so wasn't able to attend tonight. Trish, however, is here. Trish, would you like to say a few words?
You would put me on the spot.
Sorry.
Okay, well, as she said, I'm Trish Patterson. I've been active, I don't even want to name the years, but it's important to me that, for me, being able to do these kinds of things, it's how I pay my civic rent. We all have civic rent to pay. So this is my way of giving back to my community, because in my mind, if my community is good, then that means my family is good and everybody around me is good. So this is why I do what I do. And I'm really, really looking forward to what's in store and what we can do with WoW Dems. So all I'm going to say is come join us, jump on the wagon with us and take this ride with us. It's going to be fun, but we're also planning on making a huge impact in the future. So join us.
Thank you. No, it's absolutely. I will be staying on as vice president because we like to make sure that our transitions are smooth and that we don't just dump our president into the water with the sharks. So I will be taking up that position, and we will have our treasurer, of course, remain as Linda Graham, which we are so grateful for. And yes, and our secretary, Ellen Sloan, who I will say also we are not only extremely grateful for, but really appreciate the fact that she kind of pulled clutch for us, because we had a secretary and unfortunately, due to her profession, found out that she wasn't able to basically be part of the organization as partisan and PAC. So she kind of had to bow out, and Ellen was like, I'll help. So we're like, thank you. So we are very grateful And of course, because we have, oh, I'm sorry, let me check on that. Yes, awesome. Because of course we do have voting. These will be introduced, by the way, in the newsletter. But officially, are there any objections to our 2023 officers? Speak now or hold your peace until, the next meeting. I didn't think so, but that's awesome. Again, this is really all about making sure we are being excessively transparent, making sure that y'all know that you are a part of this process and that our door is open, proverbially. But that way, you are a part of this organization. You are literally the one that makes sure these candidates get money. You are the one that makes sure that these membership, are paid and are due, and really build our coalitions in our neighborhoods. So we truly want to thank you all and just make sure we are listening. So if you have a suggestion, if you have a concern, if you have a oh, hey, what if we tried, please, please, we want to hear it. And here are our committee candidates for vote currently. The candidate committee will remain Lauren Dapkus. I have membership on here as Trish, so I apologize. I thought I took that off. So that means I took off someone else. I will check on that, and I apologize. Legislative, we actually have a new board member, Katie Glasick. And events and outreach, we also have a new board member. Her name is Nikki. For privacy and security purposes, I did not put her entire last name because unfortunately that is women on the internet right now. We also have a couple people that are potentially interested in co-chairing things like communications, fundraising, and yes, membership, but they don't want to do it solo. They have ideas and they really want to make sure they take part, but they're not comfortable just chairing. So one of the things that we're trying to do, especially as I mentioned, we're all volunteers, is just like what we did with the president. We want to make sure we have co-chairs, because the more that we actually share the weight, the easier it's going to be. And oh my God, I was hoping you would say that, Brittany. Thank you. I'm very excited. So yes, thank you, Brittany Verdell. I am excessively excited to have you join us. And then we, of course, will connect with Sadia and Trish. Yes. Anyone who is interested in helping and wants to co-chair, please let us know, because we know it can, be a lot. We know that these are volunteer positions. We don't want you to have to do it alone. We want you to be a thought leader and really help build that coalition and that team. We want to kind of work smarter, not harder. We want these organizations to kind of all work together. All right. So speaking of that endorsement process that I mentioned earlier, and for any hopeful potential future candidates on this call, we will be endorsing candidates of all genders in these nonpartisan races if they choose. I mentioned, I think prior to the recording, there are going to be some, because these are nonpartisan races, where they won't necessarily reach out for our endorsement. And it's not because that they don't, personally identify as Dem. It's because they want the community to know that they don't identify as a particular partisan. They identify as a leader of that community. We're totally about that. If you do not want to be officially endorsed, that is fine. But please let us know that you would like some volunteers or some amplification. Maybe we'll share a post or make sure that our members know that you are a reasonable candidate in the newsletter. Even if you are not officially endorsed, we want to make sure that we are amplifying non-extremists, because as I mentioned again, unfortunately, before the recording, we have some very concerning rhetoric coming from the city council meetings and school board meetings, not just from extremist people in the audience, but literally from the board members themselves. So dates, we will use an online form like we did before. Again, thank you, Laura Dapkus. But you'll be invited to fill out that questionnaire based on the email that you gave the county when they compile their list of like, hey, here's who's filed and here's who's running. We take that information and then we send out requests to fill out the questionnaire if you want to. The deadline, of course, for filing for these nonpartisan races is Wednesday, January 18th, 2023 through Friday, February 17th at 5 p.m. And they are very serious about that 5 p.m., just FYI. So if you are interested in running, please reach out to your county party. Please reach out to your local Democratic club. Let them know that you're wanting to run. That way we can actually all coordinate and really strategize and not have multiple people running for the same position. Again, these nonpartisan races, they do not have primaries. So whoever runs, it's from there. So if there are already, you know, a couple people that are pretty reasonable, like for 2 races, we want to make sure that if you're like, hey, I would like to run and this is what I'm interested in, that we get you into a position where we're able to actually amplify you and say like, yes, both of these people will be representing us. So please make sure you are coordinating there. We will then send out our questionnaire. The deadline for completion will be Friday, March 3rd, also at 5 p.m. We're not like as sticklers as, you know, the counties will be. If it is 5:02, like we're not going to be like, nope. We're not like them. We're not like the official government. But we will actually vote on those. We'll give the candidate committee time to go through those endorsement applications, and then we will vote on their recommendations on March 12th. And therefore our communications team will make sure that those are announced and shared the week of March 13th. So just so y'all are aware of kind of the timing there. Yes, there is an election coming up. These are where you have the biggest impact and the most power. So please, if you are not already registered at an updated address of where you are currently residing, please do so. And actually, if you are interested in becoming a voter deputy registrar, so basically someone who registers other people, those are open now. So reach out to your county and ask them when they're having trainings. I know, was it Rock the Vote? I could be wrong, so don't hold me to this, but I believe organizations like Rock the Vote will actually have trainings where they will do all 4 counties. I did that in the past. I have not done it yet this year, but they are on odd numbered years. So even if you were registered in 2021 for 2022 as well, this year we have to get renewed for 2023 and 2024. So just FYI, if you would like to register to vote, please reach out to your county. If you are not registered to vote at your current address, please do so. Please make sure all of your friends do, all of your neighbors. Literally, these races are won or lost by a dozen votes. All right, so these are our focus and concerns, of course, for 2023. Naturally, you've kind of heard me chat about these as we've gone, but we do want to make sure that we hear your feedback as well. This so far has been, with one exception, I apologize, the gun violence has obviously been mentioned by other members, not just those of us that have been volunteers for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. It's really on everybody's mind, for our school kids, you know, for our women who are in danger from gun violence, because unfortunately, all mass shooters do have that in common, is that they're men and they have a history of violence against women. So in addition to that, we also want to make sure we protect our LGBTQ youth. As I mentioned, unfortunately, I have literally been to these meetings, specifically in Collin County, although I know obviously we're also seeing some issues in other ones. I won't name names, but South Lake. Anyways, they are literally, the board, people on the board are asking for a registry of trans students. That is terrifying and it is unacceptable. Civil rights should not depend on your zip code. So it is really important that we stand up and we amplify and protect these kids. Same thing for our libraries. not just the ones that we've seen in South Lake and Frisco, was also a really bad one. But several of these schools are looking to ban books that either mention LGBTQ people or mention the fact that our country was built off of slavery, or that, racism wasn't won in a day, either by the Civil War or by Obama becoming president. Because yes, these are actually things that we hear in real life. That is huge. Banning books, of course, is unacceptable for about another 1,000 reasons, but it is really important to be able to step inside somebody else's shoes. That builds empathy. Like literally reading fiction, reading about someone who is not you and stepping into their shoes, literally scientifically builds empathy. Like psychologically has been studied and proven. So it's so important. And one of the things we also need to protect is not just our school libraries, but make sure that our local libraries don't get inundated with a lot of these requests too. We also, of course, will be amplifying action items on how we can protect abortion rights. As many of you know, with the just complete failure of the Roe v. Wade, yes, it didn't quite do enough anyway, but it gave us so many protections, especially for those of us who, again, our rights depend on our state or our zip code. It has already resulted in a higher infant maternal mortality rate. And here in Texas, we already had a pretty high one in the United States, which already has a pretty high one in our sister countries. So that's something that we are definitely looking out for. Just to clarify, we are not pro-choice, we are pro-abortion. Nobody has a choice of having an ectopic pregnancy or having a baby that doesn't develop a liver or kidneys or a heart or a brain. These are not any choices that we need to be getting involved in. These are things that we know that the person who is having the baby will be able to decide on their own. We believe that every pregnancy should be done with consent, and that therefore every pregnancy should have a happy ending. Because for those of you who don't know, I am part of a nonprofit that supports the pregnancy, loss, and infant death community, which is, of course, a lot of high-risk pregnancies and NICU, so neonatal intensive care units. So these are things that are very important to us. And of course, last but not least, this is one of the things I wanted to make sure we chatted about, and I will turn off the recording so we can kind of talk about some other organizations so you don't necessarily feel uncomfortable with the recording going. But I did want to talk a little bit about the one that we just went to. Several of the board members, we went to the GEM Multicultural Center's Martin Luther King Jr. Red Voter Forum. I'm so sorry, I know I'm butchering that. But it was amazing. It was a lot of local organizations, both nonpartisan and democratic, where we all came together as like-minded individuals, because again, civil rights is not politics, it is humanity. So it was really amazing. It was interfaith. Like I said, there were a lot of democratic parties. There was also a lot of youth. And this is a really big portion of building our coalition partners, because unfortunately, Texas is not a red state. We are not in, these red counties. We are in non-voting counties. We are in, non-voting areas, because a lot of people do. They feel disillusioned. And they say like, oh, well, my vote doesn't count. I don't want to vote. Why bother? We've been gerrymandered. And yes, these things are true. We have been gerrymandered so that, people are basically choosing who they want to vote rather than the other way around, which is choosing who represents us. So it's really important for us to say, hey, these are literally won or lost by a dozen votes. So if you want your vote to count, this is where it matters the most. So I'll send out in the newsletter some of the organizations that participated. And I'll also be wanting to hear from you basically on like, hey, here's other organizations that I really think that we should partner with. And I really think we should reach out to, because again, it's about building those bridges and about making sure we're actually sharing resources, sharing information, really making sure that we're amplifying each other, rather than feeling like we're scattered. This is one thing, of course, that in the nonprofit space, we really need, well, some of us are doing okay, some of us need to do better, but we really try to make sure that we're all working together. So as an example, my particular nonprofit works with others that are in the NICU space, or others that are in like the bereavement space, and we're all working together. We all have a little bit different niche, but we're all partners. And that's what we really want to make sure that we do with a lot of these races. We want to say, yes, we are openly democratic. We openly support women, all women, anyone who identifies as a woman. And we want to make sure that we really stand up and speak out together and say, like, this is how we can make a difference.